Yeah, I was looking at stuff. I saw that one of my wild trade. It was a very exact, but I couldn't use it. But I did research, that would
Mm-hmm.
On the install and configure Atom development environment, are we doing that in here? But earlier it said that it was due by midnight today, and now it says that it was due at 8 a.m. today.
If you look at the assignment, you'll see you don't have to do it.
Yeah, we just noticed that. We're like, wait a second.
Don't worry about it. No, it's just if we had to switch to staying at home, and we don't have to. So don't worry about that one. Just throwing things at you like crazy. Let's see, when's that? I'm trying to get all this updated here. Let me share my screen.
Oh, no, I had a question.
Things I want to do
Didn't even open it until yesterday.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we only 16.
so right.
Yeah, talk about that.
No, I know.
Yeah. Not too much of a surprise, but still though.
Well, and two, if you go on the last one, we're trying to correspond.
I could open it Sunday if
Whenever I was talking about like
Probably
the Python.
it's probably just like how this is like
What function do you use the Python?
No, because it doesn't tell you if you got it right or wrong. There was a function. I never got it. Like I looked at one point.
That's like a weird area. It's like, yeah, I'm thinking that they shut down. Yeah.
Like, I mean, people.
Okay, I'm going to try to get attendance going. Our plans for today are here. Your group. Your group is going to present your quest. Now, I'm not sure exactly where you are with your group. Some of you might have kind of created it on your own because we have people everywhere, so I can totally understand that. So we have a limited amount of time for presenting your quest. So I want you to get together with your group here, there, everywhere, wherever you can, and decide whose quest is going to be presented, one per group. We can't see everybody's. Now, whenever I work with computer people in general, sometimes they're quiet. Have you guys seen that? And I can have the most quiet computer people in the world. This one, for several years, I actually had a student who I used to kid with him that he was my favorite student, but in some ways it was true. I nicknamed him Silent Matt because he never spoke at all. And that's the way a lot of people in my class can be over the years, pretty silent. But boy, oh boy, you put them in front of the class and have them start showing off their code, and all of a sudden they start talking like you never ever get them to shut up. And they're like, and then I had to decide if I was going to use a Boolean or if I was going to use an integer. And so I decided to use a Boolean, and I did this, and I did this, and I did this. And that's awesome because they're so proud of the work they did with their code. But we don't have that much time. So when you're presenting your quest, we want to see it and we want to see how awesome it is because I've seen enough to know that we have some really, really good ones. But we would like to see how it works and then step back and show us some of your code. We changed tracks, not really changed tracks, but learned new information in our class while you were working on it. Let me shut this off. I've got this weird background music. Feel how weirdo. That one's off. I've got it in too many places now. There we go. Okay. So I want to hear about your quest and we want to see it. We want to know what kind of things you ran into. After we present our quest, there will be some time for us to have questions. I think last time I said we could look at our Chapter 9 collab document and see if we needed anything finished up on it. We need to get started with Chapter 7 looking at arrays. Your Unit 3 exam is sitting out there in Canvas. The date was incorrect on your exam, so it's been extended. I just went ahead and extended them both to Friday night because it wasn't letting you into the exam the way it should have been. So hopefully that didn't cause too much stress. Let's make things exciting for everybody. Because we're always working in this exciting time, yesterday afternoon they asked us, do you want your classes to stay in class or do you want them to go remote? We want to know by tonight. That's a pretty quick decision to make about such a big deal. So it's kind of hard to make that decision. In my case, I have Career Center students on Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, so I can't go remote for those days. So I thought, well, there really isn't any reason to go remote. Looking at our class, we have today, then we have 2 more times that we meet, and that's it. So we're pretty well about done. So I'm going to say that we're still staying seated in class. And of course, it's just totally up to you as to whether you stay seated or work from home. Now, we have some people that have been working from home all semester that have just done a great job, that have everything done. We also have some people that have worked from home all semester that are falling behind. Usually we have that same kind of thing in class. So I don't know if it has anything to do with people working from home or not. I think it's just that same thing that sometimes people in this class especially can get a little distracted. Something can happen. And then if they miss a whole chapter, it's really hard to get caught back up. And it can happen really easy. So I say that happens whether we're working remotely or together in class. So since we only have these 2 days left, today we're going to try to get in some information about arrays. But on the 1st, in the week after Thanksgiving, we'll finish up with any leftover stuff about arrays. And we'll do some image processing a little bit because we can read a file that way. And then on the 8th, we'll, whoops, that's leftover. That's not us. I was updating too many things in too many places, huh? That's what happens in Canvas. So we'll say that on the 8th, we'll be looking at our last couple of things. And your final project will be due on the 15th of December because the 8th will be our last class day. We don't have a scheduled final time because we're a hybrid class. So you'll just have that project that'll be due the 15th. Now, some considerations about this shifting or not shifting. Keep masking. If you decide to go someplace next week, that's great, but please quarantine and don't bring it into class. I have a student in the other 120 class who said they were going to travel to Illinois over the break. That's their decision, but I don't want them to bring that in here to affect potentially the other students that are in class. So they need to quarantine when they get home. And if they go to Walmart and affect other people, we can't do anything about that, but I can sure tell them, please don't come here because that's your choice. You coming here is my choice. So if you travel, please quarantine. If you have to be around large crowds, or if you choose to be around large crowds, especially unmasked large crowds, you know, indoors, please go ahead and quarantine yourself afterwards. We want to make sure and balance safe practices with class success. So what do I mean by that? I mean, if you're feeling nervous about coming to class, you should work from home. But if you have a hard time working from home, it's hard to pay attention. It's super hard for me, as much as I would like to. When I'm watching a Zoom session, I kind of zone off and start doing other things and things. So that's your decision, but know that I don't hold it against you at all if you decide to do Zoom sessions and not come in these last couple of weeks. That's totally up to you. I want you to do what you need to do to feel safe. That's our most important thing. I'm so proud of all you guys. You're working through this pandemic towards a greater career goal. That's what to do in a pandemic, right? Get yourself set up so that when it's over, you're in a better position than you were when it started. I think that's super smart. Don't forget, all week next week is Thanksgiving. That's the only upcoming thing I have on our little reminder board here, is that we have Thanksgiving next week. Any comments, suggestions? You guys heard things from other classes? Or all of your classes staying seated? Or did they mention anything?
My networking classes today said that there was some chatter that we might not be doing seated after the break, but just check your email. Obviously, the school wants to stay open, but if the city shuts down, there's nothing they can do.
Right.
But that's all I've heard.
Yeah, I think they're just kind of leaving it up to the instructors to be like, welding. Like I always say, welding is really hard to teach virtual. And they're doing a lot with it. They have actual welding simulation packages that you can do a lot of welding online, but there's nothing like that actual fire in the hand feeling, right? So it's really hard to do virtually. Our stuff, so much easier. We're already on Zoom. We're already just coding and sharing and stuff. So a lot easier for us to do it than it is for some of the other classes. For me, I would do it in a snap, but like I said, I've got several of the Career Center classes that are high school students, so I have to come anyways. And yesterday when I got the email, it was during the 120 class that is on Monday and Wednesday. And so I did a real quick Kahoot survey just to ask them, and it came back, 9 of them said that they wanted to stay seated, okay? They tacked you down there. And 5 of them said that they wanted to go remote. And when I first looked at it, I was like, oh, that's really close. And then later on, I realized that's not really close. It's like 2/3 of them said they wanted to stay seated. So I'll look at those numbers and say, all right, we'll stay seated. It's only 2 weeks. If it was 3 weeks or 4 weeks, then it would be worth the trouble. But so far, 2 weeks is not so much. All right, I'm going to get this thing set up. While I'm getting attendance, go ahead and talk and visit with your group or visit with yourself if that's the case, and decide whose project you're showing and who's talking.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, the chicken. We should.
I'll check it out.
Like at the end of this
You can
class,
send
we
it
should
to
all
yours to me.
What do
go
you
back and
say?
make another
What do you
game.
say?
Scratch. What's that thing called?
Yeah.
Do what?
Was it Scratch? That game?
Oh, yeah, that would be a
We should go
really
back
good
and make
one. That's what we should make the final.
Yeah, that's our final project.
No.
No.
Yeah, I actually, no.
You know the link I sent you, this last collab link I sent you? It should be in Discord still.
I tried to run it, but
Yeah. When I looked at like.
See if you can open it again, because if it is, that's, where you'll find it, as long as it updates what I put in there.
No.
I'm gonna scroll.
Like everybody else. It goes to show that like when you see a game like that, whatever. But like a lot of I guess it's kind of staying power, so I'm still around. I can do that. I've got it pulled up.
Did you send it to me in a personal message or was it on the group to share online?
No.
Right.
their club lab and sent it.
Yeah.
You might want to send it again.
Which I don't mind, that's not, that really wasn't what we did.
Mine has a lot
Oh,
of
really? I don't remember what we were getting.
nested loops in it. The freaking air trap.
Yeah, let's stay in there. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, trying to get the air to and copies or.
Easy with the modules, because then you can just recall it, that's why. I can't believe we would have done it. We didn't know about it.
No, we did,
Well,
but we could only use examples.
Yeah.
Up to chapter 6. Yeah.
Okay, we have about 3 people that are off-site, so include them if you can.
What advice? Oh, regret. Oh, really?
Seth, do you have any helpers with you? Do you have any helpers on remotely? No? Okay.
Are you having trouble logging in?
Yeah.
Your group started out so good. That's okay. You didn't need them. All right, let's see what we got. Everybody ready?
Well, I know I was ready, but sadly for some reason, it all of a sudden is now giving me trouble days after it actually would work.
Let's see.
Yeah, I think I see sharp. Grade of C or better in CIS120.
It's saying that that my grades were right here. It's not fine. So if I was saying it was working, I tested it multiple times.
Yeah.
But now
Add the link.
I'm really.
Yeah.
confused on
That's probably would be
it. So, okay. So
I need to
make it.
real class, so it's not.
Oh,
Oh,
good.
it's probably like whenever he's running it or something.
Yeah.
Change. I'm trying to put it shorter there, so you can type accidentally your code.
Okay, yeah, it must have, it might have, maybe part of it was just the,
You always hear about it online.
then of the,
Coding base stores.
of like the shape, because since we did a group, it might like, because like there were multiple times I did kind of say like, oh, it's, you know, we got some work done, and like someone did CIS or whatever, and it's like, what now?
I wouldn't doubt that it did that a little bit, so good, it was just that word plan.
Oh, yeah.
What did you have?
So the only one that showed up.
Well, just those 2 letters were not there anymore.
Oh, wait, that's, oh, wait, my bad. That's wrong one. It's CIS120. Got you.
Right? Oh my goodness. I'm so excited to see lots of people just working and doing some neat stuff.
Uh-oh.
I would like to start backwards. Seth's by himself anyway, so let's just start at the beginning and go with group 1. Group 1, go ahead and share whoever screen you like, and let's see this beauty.
Oh, right. No, hold on.
was gonna play it, yeah.
Share screen. Is that big enough? You guys can't be anywhere.
You can control scroll, it'll zoom in. Nice.
There we go. No, it's this one. All right. How would you like us to do this?
You guys want to see it running first? Yeah, let's see it in action.
Okay. Don't break.
I think that's a separate
Oh,
one.
yeah.
That's just a little one that got popped in there.
Do it all on a Don't say uh-oh right now. All right.
Yeah.
We're going to put in.
Yeah,
My
let's
name.
put- no, I'll just talk about it.
Mine has a lot of code in it. More dialogue.
All right, where you guys want to go?
Yeah.
Where you want to go? Spooky cave.
Spooky Cave. One.
I like yours.
Yeah,
No, that's fine.
I just kind of.
We found a sword.
Woohoo!
Like, oh, this is too much.
That's cute. Run it again.
Okay. Yeah. It only took me like 2 hours to make it. We'll put lowercase in. Show you that I capitalized the first.
Ooh, fancy.
Okay, where you want to go?
Where do you guys want to go?
Little Oasis. The Oasis. That's number 2 that I can. We found the plaque.
Ooh, that looks nice.
So one of the things we did kind of differently than, let's see if I can find it. There we go. Is that we wanted our lucky number to kind of
Do something.
Yeah, to kind of mean something. So we kind of tied our location to the. No, we tied our location, as you can see right up here. We made our, so how do we do this? It's been 2 weeks, so we made our location a value, so that corresponds to location, and then we did a range for our items. So it added the lucky number and the location value together. And that would tell us what item I got. So it added a little bit of randomization, but
Mm-hmm.
you know, if you rolled a really high lucky number and you picked the like normal looking field, which is a 4, you're pretty much guaranteed to get the highest item in our ranges, which is the plaque. So it added a little bit. I guess it wouldn't be. It'd be pseudo random at that point. I guess even more pseudo random. And that's how we did ours.
Any questions? You see anything in there that you want to ask about? Nice commenting, huh?
Yeah, very good.
Looks really, really good, very helpful. So give them a hand, really good job, yay! I love the way it came out. Okay, group 2, let's see yours. I know you guys have been working from here and there and everywhere.
Yeah, we're a little split up. I'll be sharing for group 2 now. I'm gonna do Python. I mean, I'll do idle, only because it's kind of hard to see the output when you click on it.
Yeah, it is.
Can I have Zoom when you're in? I can't Zoom on idle. All right.
Try when it's full screen. I don't know if that'll help.
No scroll on idle. That's unfortunate. All right, so we will run it on Colab. So it's called Diamond Quest. Enter your name. Everything's set up pretty defensively here. It starts out as just saying you're gonna be going somewhere, it gives you a lucky number. And I had it set up where you get to pick one item to start with in your bag. This is all defensive. You can type anything you want here, and it's gonna bring you back until you choose the right an item that actually applies. So for one, I'm gonna choose rose glasses. Now you can see you now have rose glasses in your bag. Time to get going. The map shows 4 hallways, and there's a key that's locked, but there's a door that needs a key for the exit. You can go right or left. This is defensive too. I can type in anything. And I won't let you go. So we're gonna go left. Oh, I got a flag. Okay, so there's the flag. Put your name on it, and then now we get a choice to search the next room. The object of this is to get out of the door with the key. You find everything else, but you're actually looking for the key. Search next room. So we'll go left. We found the flag. It's not really doing anything for us. All right. Wow, look, here we go. So search next room, I went left, I found the rose, but I also found the key. And it says, thanks to the rose glasses. So my drop rate is 50%. And it shows a summary of what I have in my inventory. So I got the rose glasses, I got a trophy, and a red rose, and the key. And this, we didn't see it because it jumped back up. What happens is, this is on a delay, so it'll print rattle, 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 very slowly, and to get through the door. And then it prompts me, because I won, it says go game. If I didn't, it would say game over. And I could just move through it again.
Let's see that beautiful code.
Diamond. All right, so go to the top here. Read the intro. I'm passing around name a little bit, and mostly inventory is being passed around because I need to have the rose glasses in there.
And so you set up a list. So
I did.
Dustin's using an array, which we'll be talking about. So he's sneaking ahead. Good job.
See if I can find it. Here's our choices for the halls. The next hall. Now here's the actual hall. So this is directing you left, right, depending on the halls. Now on your halls, this is the plaque. This is the code I use for the plaque here. I'm basically just taking the length of the name and adding 5 dots to it. Because what I did was I used the for loop here to do the top part of the plaque and then the bottom part of the plaque. And in between printing the 2 for loops, I throw the name in there with just dots or preset. So no matter the length of the name, the top and the bottom of the plaque lines up. And then for the diamond, which we kind of saw right here, this diamond, this is a good example. Actually, now that's highlighted. I'm basically printing white space distance that I want, and then printing the dots. And then I'm taking away from the white space and printing the dots. So I'm determining where the dots go by the white space. And I did that with this right here. That's how I figured out my diamond. Just basically controlling the white space. So I set up an inventory, and I chose where I wanted. I did a slice basically in between the white space to make it go out and in, and that's how I achieved that. And then here's the key room. So if the rose glasses, you get 3 items in the beginning. If the rose glasses are in your inventory, you have a second RNG roll here, and if they're in there, you have a 50% chance, a 1 in 2 chance to get the key. If not, you're rolling a 1% chance to get the key. And have a little dialogue written there. And that's only if you pick that one room. And then here's a little just ASCII art diamond also I put in there. And here's the sleep timer for the door. So I imported, this is a time module, and you just do sleep, and that's your delay right there. You get to select your delay there. It just gave it a little interactiveness that we didn't get to see, but it prints stuff on a delay, which is pretty cool. And that's it. That's the end of it.
Very cool. I think everybody wants to play it. So let's It's really fun.
That's awesome.
Any questions?
Can you scroll up to your, like your first error trap? We kept getting hung up on ours, and I just like to see how other people did theirs.
What I'm using is not in. I found not in so much better than or. And plus, if you read about not in is the exact value of that. And when you're using other comparison operators, actually sometimes can not be the same, but it will be as to how the computer is reading it. So not is more exact. I like that. And that's basically what I use. I started out using tries and accepts. I really did. And then once I got into this, I found out for this purpose, I'm sure tries and accepts later are absolutely needed. But for here, I could put in anything but what I want, and it loops around for me. I'll always make it to my else statement, and it'll loop back to the while loop and prompt you for input again. So I can put in anything, capitals, and unless I put 1, 2, or 3 in there, I'm never gonna throw out an error.
That's a nice way to do it.
That is awesome. Thank you. That helps a lot.
Yeah, it really does. And it looks like you were able to be really consistent with your code by using that too.
I really like that comparison. I think.
Yeah, if you guys notice, the functions that they have in there are really making that code maintainable. If you look through as Justin's scrolling through, you can see how each function is very similar to the other functions. So it makes it real maintainable. If something needs to be changed, it's going to be really easy to find that, that location and make that update. And then we're going to also be able to be sure that it didn't have a negative impact on something else because everything's separated out so nicely like that. So, and I know you worked hard to put the functions in.
I wanted to make sure I included that. We were doing it in class. Wanted to make sure I had functions in there for sure. And I think I'm getting the wrong idea about functions at the end of the day, actually, because when I first started playing with them, I felt like I was using functions to direct the game. In which way the path, and kind of finding that's really not what you use functions for. So I backed away from that because my first attempt at functions with that was kind of just more like steering the hallways and which way I was going. Because you can, so what you can do is you can call a function at the end of the module and send you somewhere. With the function, I could send you to another line of code that prints out all different stuff. So I was kind of using it that way for a while. Then I'm like, that's probably really not how you should be using it.
And I did have one student that had a problem. Can you scroll down to where your main is? And so I had a student in another class or another semester that in his main function was calling a function that was doing some looping, gathering some input, doing some error checking. And if everything was good in that function, was calling the main again. And Python got really upset about that, main calling function calling main, kind of that recursive mess that was going on there. And it was like, no, you can't do that kind of call when you've already done that call, if that makes sense. It was like getting it trapped in a never-ending loop sort of thing, one function calling the other back and forth.
Yes, you're mentioning that, and that is something that I kind of ran into because in reference to looping back, sending them back to the start menu at the end, you can see I'm calling main here to send them back. But if I use a return statement here, that will not work.
Oh, really?
It'll skip over that call.
Because it doesn't start at the beginning of your main.
It's strange how I can't use a return on that.
So it is a possibility, but I think that brings up such an important point that we want our functions to be standalone and separate units of work. Like you say, not controlling necessarily the logic of our program, but doing chunks of work for us, for that program, whatever that chunk of work might be, like getting the location and the way you have it set up. That's ideal.
I have one question for you because it was something I really wanted to figure out. Couldn't figure it out. Is it possible to have a function in your array could I call a function from the array? Because I was trying to have it where I was passing around, say, the trophy as a callable item, because at the end, when it printed out, you have this, that, and the other thing in your inventory. I wanted to print out the actual plaque.
So kind of like a dynamic function name where
Yeah,
you could control which function got called based on,
the list.
there may be a capability, but it would be a very advanced kind of thing. So at our level, it's not really something that we would want to do.
I brought it to the forums, they couldn't answer it either.
No, it's.
Believe me, they didn't understand what I was asking for. It seemed like, sometimes. they
Well,
just
you,
look
like,
it one way.
in Java and C#, there are facilities built in to do that kind of thing, and they barely gloss over them in like Java 2 and C# 2, and they really still yet don't even get into how you do that kind of thing. So it's such an advanced topic. Look at you. You're just like, I want to know this really advanced.
So I really,
Because that's really thinking, outside of the box and thinking of how could I make this be the most flexible that it could be. So,
well, because the wording of the assignment said the object must be obtainable, I really felt you meant it needs to be displayable from an inventory. You could obtain it, like putting it in an inventory felt like that was obtainable, and that's what threw me up. It was trying to follow the instructions is why I spent so much time trying to figure that out. I'm like,
well, you
it
did a
must be
great
so
job.
easy, I just can't do it.
I think you can assume that you kind of have gone above and beyond. So I think
Yeah, I'd say.
Good.
Very, very much. Give him a hand. It's really awesome. Sometimes working alone is good, I'm sure we want to see Amanda's too. We just don't have time. Okay, let's go. We'll see if we have time. Let's go to group 3. Maybe we will.
I'm glad we did.
This is actually group 4 here.
Oh, whoops.
You're fine. You're good. Group 3 is not in the room, so we'll see if we have any of them online.
Okay. For some reason, I always think we're group 3.
I always think it too, so we're okay.
Oh, yeah, because we're in the third row. That's why I was.
He's got it. That's why. Zoom in on that thing.
Okay, all right. So,
There we go.
I guess we'll just go through first. So, it's just some kind of generic name. So that's, the name, we'll give you a lucky number. So we were thinking to basically use the lucky number as like, I guess, really how lucky you are when you're doing like an action like finding something. So it's like, hey, which door do you want to go through? We'll choose door number 1. Okay, so you got the bedroom, dirty, find something. So dig, yeah, we'll dig around the room. And then, so it's like, all right, we'll keep digging until it's like, hey, you found a plaque. We'll look at it when we're done. It's like, okay, so now we go back. It's like, okay, so which door do you want to go through? So let's choose door number 3. And you entered the man cave. And, well, okay, we got to keep calm, I guess, because you can't just be watching like a football game or something right now. You got to be finding something. So we'll dig around a little bit. And we found, I totally forgot about using like any kind of timer stuff with some of this, but basically you find some gems, and kind of takes you right back to the end immediately, showing like a little plaque. But yeah, we'll just go through the code now. So it's not like honestly, like after seeing like the previous like code, this one seems like really easy and simple in comparison. Like I don't really know what else to comment about it, but basically we just have the input mod to get your number, your name, and then basically so next then from the main you go into the doors of setting up like which action you're going to which door you're going to go through, and so then depending on which one you're going to get, you'll get either the bedroom, which has the plaque hidden somewhere, probably like under your bed for all we know, or the kitchen. You might find some gems in the kitchen. Then you got the man cave, which might have some gems in there, and possibly, like a football game. But whoever the narrator is, his team lost, so he doesn't want to stick around anymore in the man cave. And we were originally trying to not have too much stuff in the main module, just like, we were trying not to have too much stuff, but as we were kind of going, we figured that might as well just have like a few things just to kind of, I don't know, set it up to make sure that we had, you know, just to simplify it down so we didn't have as many modules in there. But yeah.
I like it. And let's scroll back up to the top a little bit. And if you look there in your doors function, you basically have the same thing as Justin. It's just like he mentioned that in that he found is just be real effective in that while condition. It just worked out really well. Your logic other than that is pretty identical. So don't diss yourself. It looks really good.
You said you had where the lucky number decided how lucky they were. Like
Yeah.
Luck stat.
Yeah, so basically, the lucky number, what we do, so like, let's say, for example, with but so basically, going past door number one, whenever you want to like start digging around, then it will have a random number that will be the, I guess, like the chance of you finding something. And so depending on what your number is, if you, you know, like the lower your number is, the more times it will take for you to keep looking around. So the longer it will take. So like if your lucky number is 2, it might take you 2, 3, or 4 times because each time it's gonna keep randomly throwing another number that you're gonna try to be comparing. Kind of like I guess Dungeons and Dragons or something like that. Like I don't really play that very much, but like you know you roll the dice to kind of see who's gonna be the one with the higher number, and so whoever gets the higher number, then that's the side that goes. And so you just keep rolling until you have a higher number.
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain the while loop on the bottom of 2 variables? I thought that was pretty interesting. Close to the bottom, you're comparing plaque and gem.
Oh yeah, so basically that was to, let's see.
Line 96.
Yeah. Okay. So basically, that was basically where we had, just like the some of the main functions like the doors and the inside of the room function. Basically, they say like, you know, until you have gems and a plaque, you're just going to keep going back to the doors to choose until you find both plaque and some gems.
Very cool.
So yeah, that's.
I think it looks awesome. If you scroll back up to your big function that has all that code, all that text in it,
Oh, yeah.
the one thing that it makes me question is, I noticed that in each of our events, you're checking the answer, but now I see why. So I just wonder if maybe each of those events couldn't be their own function.
Yeah, that was the kind of thing of like, well, we could do that. But like,
Yeah, and that's just something that as you evolve with your development, you'll notice things like that too. So it looks great, but that's the only place I see where you could have maybe separated things out a little bit more. Looks really good. Now, one thing that you'll see a lot in real world code, just while we're looking at this, because there is so many messages here, so many strings, a lot of developers will put all of these like up at the top and just create an array or just a whole bunch of messages, and then we could just use those variable names for all those messages in our code. And that's just something that developers do to try to keep all of this length out, you know, and having all these literal values hidden in our code. That way, if we have all of our messages up at the top, if a user comes in and says, I find this one message really offensive, you know, which people seem to do lately, we can find it real easy and fix it. Normally, it's going to be the company saying, we need to change this message, you know, instead of using this word, we want to use this word now. So I love it. I think that really gives us a good way to see why sometimes they would move all those strings like that up to the top just to keep them separate. Because it doesn't matter to us in our code. It works great. Any other questions, you guys? I think they did a good job. Give them a hand. Yay! Before Seth goes, one thing I wanted to mention, let's see if I can bring this dealie up here. Go down a little bit. Whenever we're looking at our functions, I'm going to put in, I'm not sure what color I have here. I'll just grab one. I'm not sharing. Oh, thank you. if I have the function here, my green one is my main. And if I set that up, you'll notice the way our book said to do it, we had our main that called all of the other functions. Whoops, I want to do this, not me draw. And another one. And so our main called our input, process, and output functions. Well, sometimes people will come up with this idea, which is totally valid. And they'll say, you know, I could have my main call my input. Let me get this over here. Got too many little weirdo things. I could have my main call my input, and then I could have my input call my process. And then I could have my process call my output, and I could just have this stack thing like that instead of going across. Now our main is only calling one function. It's calling the next function, calling the next function. Which do you think is better? Hint, hint, the book used away. Would be better. Across, right? Because we want each function to be independent of the others. And if we do this kind of stacking thing, now this function is dependent on this one because it's got to call it and it's got to figure out what to do with it when it gets back. And this function is dependent on this one because it's got to call it and figure out what to do with it when it gets back. So anytime we start messing up our modularization, where instead of going across and keeping all of our functions completely independent, we're merging them together. We want to make sure that there's a reason to do that. You know, and that might be the case if this is, you know, check level, level 1, level 2, you know, and it's something like that where it makes sense for us to have that depth of function calls, but normally we want to keep them separate. All right, Seth, I'm gonna let you take it.
All right, so you start by putting your character's name. Right, and then it's going to ask you what you want to do. So you have three options. You can either move around, you can look around, or you can look in the inventory. Let's start by this one out. All right, here we found the black. We'll move to the allocation. Then we can choose where we want to go to. So we're going to start with the castle. And look around here. Let me find that. And if we try to look around again, we'll see that there's nothing there. So we can move. Here, we can look around. And we found a chest, but we don't have any way to open it. So we can move here. Look around, found a key. We can move back to the treasure. And we look inside of it, and we're done. We found it, right?
Awesome, let's see that code.
That's it. Okay. So to start off, we get all of our variables and rules, initializing function, and just this one, then starts with variables and another variables later, and returns function. Then before we get on here, so the main looping is based on the length of our inventory. So there's 4 items, we have to find all of them. So as long as we don't have all the items, we're going to keep doing this. So we're going to get a response. And this is just going to ask us what we want to do. And I use the same thing I did the list, the CIS120 thing here. There's only 3. It's better than doing like trying to steps. So do that, and we can turn that. So that we look for inventory. And then we choose what we do based on that. So we do that. We can move hide this elements. So the move asks us where I'm going to go, and then prints out the different places we need to do. Same thing here, to make sure we get the right stuff. And then we just change our location to whichever one we selected. Come down here. If we want to look at our inventory, this one's just get through our inventory and prints out And then you can look around. So move around, so let's say, you'll take where we are in the search. Now we'll do different ones as well. These are all pretty similar, they're just different up different things. So we can put in there. Black. That's like that thing, right here, it's similar.
Very cool.
We just added our inventory, just a list. Compare some things like it was already in our inventory, so this, if it's not in our inventory, then we do that. It was.
Questions? First of all, you're using Notepad++. And you're being able to run it?
That would be the guy who's running it.
Using idle?
Yeah,
Okay. Because I was going to say, tell me how to make Notepad++ run it. Because I like the way it collapses your functions and stuff so nicely. Questions, you guys?
I was gonna have the question, but he answered it. He actually went over almost everything. The one question was gonna be, when you did enter a room, find the object, and then try to look around, and it tells you it's empty, nothing here. I was gonna ask how did you achieve that, but you covered it pretty well. I like that.
Yeah, I like it too. And he's used arrays. And Seth, can you expand one of those functions where you have your list of valid responses? Any of them? Yeah, I think so. Yeah, there we go. Is that right? Yeah. So in this case, notice how we're kind of sneaking ahead here looking at our arrays, but it's almost the same syntax as what Justin used. It Seth created a list here of valid responses, and then if this n variable is not in that list, so it's basically the same list as Justin gave in his while statement, right? Just formatted a little bit differently, so we'll be able to do that. I love it. Very nice. Any other questions? Seth is selling that code for, I'm just kidding. Actually, we have some beautiful code all the way around, and I think that everybody just did a great job. Now I want to check in. Which group am I looking for? Group 3. Zach, Sandra, and Alicia. Okay, we don't have anybody from that group here. Let's give Seth a hand, unless you have more questions. Yay! So I think that's all of our Quest applications, and I give you quite a while to work on that because I like this creation of glory here. Wonderful, wonderful. I'm going to take over the screen here. Thank you guys all. If I missed anybody from home or anything, let me know. And then the next thing that I have on our list is questions for the greater good. So when we were looking at our functions collab document, do we have questions about that? I know we sort of left pieces hanging. That's okay. It's been a long time, hasn't it, since we looked at it? Okay, well, if you come up with anything, let me know. Let's try to stay in really close communication on Discord since we're so close to the end. And I don't need you to stay in close communication with me over Thanksgiving unless you're home and working on stuff. I mean, after. Yes.
Does that include questions to ask about the exam?
What are all the answers?
It depends, but yeah, let me know if you have questions.
So how it was writing, it wouldn't show us, if we got the words that we had to write in, it wouldn't show us if those were correct or not. So
Right.
like, it asked us about function, is it asking us to use the Python function or like the pseudocode? Like if we used lower, you know, parentheses, or do we do two lower parentheses?
That's why it hasn't graded it, because I will take either one, because I know what you've been working on.
Okay, so there's
So,
some questions like that.
So when I grade it, I'll make that decision then. Oh, this is like valid Python code, so I'll give you the points for it. Because we're just kind of to a point where you're seeing both things, so I think you should get credit for both things. So either one. It's kind of the not perfect answer there that when I grade it, I'll give you the points for it, because we are kind of in a spot where it's not specific about which syntax it wants. So either one is fine. And there's some other questions, like I think one asks you what the criteria should be for a while statement or something, and it's kind of leading the way it gives you the question. So I take a lot of different answers for
Okay,
that.
so it's not as picky as
Not as picky as your
Okay.
Excel stuff. Exactly. Because that one you're pouring over the book and you can find this sentence, but when you're taking the exam, you shouldn't be. So hopefully it'll work out. Let's take a look at arrays. I think that you guys are seeing enough code already that it might not be as much of a new thing. It's more of some clarification.
Yeah, on the quest assignment, it was like, use the tools that you went over in like chapter 6.
Uh-huh.
Arrays weren't in there.
Right. These people are just jumping ahead, aren't they?
I think that is gospel.
And I'll grade it that way too. So no, not that way. No, not gospel that way. I mean, I won't take off points because you didn't use arrays, and not the other way around. So yeah, it's always hard to know. We really hadn't talked about arrays at all. And as a matter of fact, in the other class, I had a student or two that went to the tutoring center. In the tutoring center, they started showing them how to solve this problem using arrays, and got the student way more confused than he already was. And so I kind of made a point to that class to say, you know, if the tutors are doing stuff that you've never seen, say, I don't think we're that far. But when you're talking to the tutor, you know, you're already unsure about yourself and you think the tutor knows more. And so anyways, they got it all caught up, and I think everything's all back together in their head now, and it's okay. But arrays are kind of a natural thing to use for that quest. So that's a good thing, because I wanted you guys to start thinking about them and be ready to use them. So let's look at this PowerPoint, the array structures by Riley. And I am copying things from Canvas over into our course. So do let me know if you're seeing something weird. We've had one assignment that showed up that shouldn't have. I think it was the sum of squares. I didn't feel bad about it because it was actually in our collab document. So if somebody worked really hard getting it done again, that was good practice for them, because we actually had the answer in our collab document. So I'll make it extra credit since it kind of showed up out of the blue. But always go through your modules. Let's look at array structures here. First of all, we've been since the beginning of the semester looking at variables. And you know, a variable is just a named memory location that holds some sort of data for us. And we saw with our quest that we could end up with, you know, variables like location 1, location 2, location 3, location 4, location 5, where we have some repeating elements. We can use arrays to take care of those repeating structures like that, so that we don't have to have all those different variables. They let us really save information in memory really efficiently. But arrays have some rules in working with them. And one thing is they have to be allocated before they can be used. So just a little bit of a heads up on it. We've been using variables all along. We've seen that we could have a variable named like PCT that contains a value of 25. Or we could have a variable age that has a value of 5. We could have a variable named name that holds a string, like of Joe. We could have a variable named payment that holds a numeric amount. We could even have a Boolean type variable that would hold a value of either true or false. So we've seen as we've gone through the semester, we can have lots of different data types that we save values in our variables. But sometimes we need a whole collection. Like if we wanted to keep track of a list of player names. In our quest, we just ask for one player name, but if we had multiple players, we might want more than one. So we might want a whole list of names, like this one. In this list, I have Joe, Bill, Tammy, Vera, and Austin. So I have this set up as an array. Arrays, often, when you see them in a book or anything that's explaining them, they'll go across. And they'll say, you know, Joe, Bill, Tammy. And that's the way an array is actually allocated in memory. I always show them kind of stacked, because to me, they're sort of like a column of data. And if we look at it like a stack like this, we can kind of see what's going on a little bit better. Now, when I have this array, this list of names, I need a way to know which one particular name. Like if I want to get to the name Bill, how do I find Bill in this array? Well, in order to identify a specific value in an array, arrays are assigned indexes. And indexes are just a numeric pointer that points to a specific entry in our array. So when I look at that array, I see that my indexes are just integers used as a pointer into the array to know what position I'm looking at. So if I was looking for Tammy, I would be looking for something in the name array at index position 2. And that would show me. So my index is a pointer that says which value they're looking for. The index always starts at 0. So whenever we're software developers, we just always start counting at 0. We might as well just get used to it. 1 doesn't exist anymore, it's all 0. So when I look at this array, how many entries does it have? 5? That's right. What are the valid index values? Looking at those 5 entries. 0 through 4. So if I try to use a value of 5 to get something out of this array, it would be out of range. I would get an error because there is no 5, even though there's 5 entries. So like I already said, the index value for Tammy is 2. So in my code, I could write it like this. The array is called name, and I'm looking at index location 2 in that array. If I wanted to change that name from Tammy to new name, I could use code like this. I would use an assignment statement, and my assignment statement would be assigning a value to the name array, index position 2. And the value I'm assigning is this word new name. So now after I run that line of code, instead of having Tammy in that array position, I would have this new name. So I can view or read the value that's in the array using my array name followed by the index value. And I can update what's in my array using the array name followed by the index value. In this array here, I've set up an array called age. In the array, we've added some entries when we create it. So in Python, I can use this syntax to say initialize this array with these entries, with these values. So now my age array is going to have the values 1, 45, 29, 24, and 14. So once I'm done running that line of code, except I've got that little error there. Let me fix it. This age is 1 in our list. I'll run it again so it's not messed up. So after I execute this line of code, I've told Python, create this array with these initial values. This is what's going to exist in memory. I'm going to have index position 0 has a value of 1. Index position 1 has a value of 45. So each of those values that I place in that list get placed in that array. Let's write this code. Let's go to idle and try it. And if you can't remember how to get to idle, just start typing Python in your search. And you should see idle. I haven't used it in so long. I think it's opening. There it is. Okay, so I want to do a new window. I think I'm working with the older version, 3.11, not too old. So in Python, I want to, first of all, allocate and initialize an array. Here's my array, age equals square bracket. So the square bracket is a real key when we're working with arrays or lists. The square bracket tells Python or whatever programming language we're working with that this is a collection. This is the type of variable that has more than one value. My last one was 14. So when I allocate this age array, like I said, Python is going to put those initial values in the array. So we could print the entire array. I'll just say print age. Let's run that. It's going to make us save. Oops, in whatever version of Python I'm working with, it did not save as a .py file. So I'm going to put the .py on there manually so that it'll color code it correctly. There we go. Now I should be able to run this and I should see my array printed out there in my print statement. So there it is. If I use the print statement and just give it a complete array name, it'll just print out that whole list. It'll put the square brackets around it and the whole 9 yards. What if we just want to print one entry? Let's say we're going to print index value 4. Print age at index value 4. Now if I run it, for index value 4, what should we see output? Which one? 24 or 14?
20. Oh.
0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Tricked you. Okay, let's run it. It's going to be that 14, is it? So starting at 0. There it is. So it gets our very last value. Let's print index value 0. And we'll print out our age at index location 0. And of course, that should print out that number 1. And lastly, I'm going to print out of range index value 5. Print age at index location 5. And we know our array is not that big, so we're going to be out of range. I want you to see what that error looks like. So as I run this thing, I should see all my output, that my index value 4 gives me a value of 14, index value of 0 gives me a 1. And then when I tell it I'm going to do that out of range thing, notice the error that we get. It says index error, list index out of range. And it's really easy for us to tell what's going on here in our code because we don't have very much code. But if this index access, this access of our array, were buried down in some function, it might be kind of hard for us to figure out what was wrong with it. So it's nice that we get a good error and it tells us that it was not in the valid range. Let's copy this code. It's just a little bit of code. Control A, Control C, and I want to go to that visualizer website, that Python tutor site, and paste it. Because it's really cool the way the Python tutor site shows you the array getting allocated. So let's do visualize execution. The very first thing it's going to do is allocate our age array. So when I click next, I should see this whole age array. And you can see in memory how it's got our index value and then the actual data value for each of those array locations set up. If we continue executing, we'll see it going through the print stuff. Now I want to find age at index value 4. It found it. It doesn't really show us much. So really the neat thing that we see from the visualizer is this array all in memory allocated out for us. One thing that you'll hear often, at least out of my mouth, is the term subscript. An index can also be referred to as a subscript. It's kind of like, you know, a subscripted variable where it's got this extra additional piece of information that goes along with it. So you will hear that term too. Okay, let's minimize that for a minute and look at them a little bit more. My beautiful array here in memory is going to be saved in contiguous memory. Now there's a question in our fill in the blank ones, the ones that are super picky about that. And in our textbook, they say continuous memory. And I always use the term contiguous because that's correct. Contiguous means I have to find memory that's all together, that's available. This whole array, I have to have enough RAM to fit it all in one spot. That's no big deal for these 5 numbers. But if I'm making an array of 1 million employee names, well, now it's a big deal, right? Because I've got to have all of that memory available all at once. We'll see as we get more advanced in programming, there are array types of constructs that allow us to get away from that limitation. But when we're working with a basic list, we have that limit. It's all got to be continuous, continuously available memory. So if I have 8 gig of RAM and I create an array that takes up 4 gig, guess what? I might have a hard time running my program on my machine. I might get a lot of errors. Now, when we're looking at this array display here, this top number is our index value. We don't really see that. You know, that's not really something that's part of our variable. It's this data value that we're concerned with. That's what we want, is what is the data that's held within that array. So this line of code does an array initialization. We just ran it. We saw that age is the name of the array. All of the values between commas are our initial values. All of those values have to be within square brackets and separated by commas. And they determine the initial size of the array. If I want to access one entry in the array, I specify its index value. that would allow me to save the data at index location 3 into a variable named 1age. That's our variable that'll hold the entry and our array name and our index pointer that's within square brackets. And when we get done running that line of code, our 1age variable would now hold that same value. Now, if we want to update that array entry, we saw that we could use the array name followed by the index pointer that's within square brackets. And then after the equal sign, we would have the new value that we want to assign to that array location. I can't believe they're mowing in November. A lot of mowing, apparently. So whenever we're working with arrays, a lot of times we need to look at all of the entries in an array. The arrays that you guys were looking at earlier were often with like the valid values and things like that. But sometimes we might have a list of items in an array where it's like the accounts to process. And so we have to keep checking every entry in the array. Oh, here's an account to process, go do all my work. Oh, here's an account to process, go do all my work. So we have lots of reasons within our code that we might need to walk or traverse the array and look at every value in our array. So I could use a for loop, right? And I could say for I in range 0 through 5, right, the length of my array. I could run that for loop and look at every entry in the array using my index. But I have another type of for loop that I can use when I'm working with a list like that, and that's called a for each. So this for loop down here, notice, is a little different. Instead of having the range parameter, it just uses that same in keyword that we were seeing so much in our Quest application. So here we're saying for a thing, which would be each value in our age array, print each of those things. We can put that in our code. Let's try it. I'll just put it right down here. I'll print beginning loop, and then for what do we call it in our presentation? I can't see it. I buried it. I think a thing in age, print a thing. So this for loop is awesome. Let's run it. Oops, I've got to fix my out of range problem. Let me comment those 2 lines out because I would like it to run. And now we see we begin our loop, and our for each loop prints out each of the entries in our array. So that for each loop is really, really handy. Here's our output over here, kind of the same as what we were doing. When we walk through a for loop using an index, say using our count parameter in our for loop, I want you to look at this awesome animation in this PowerPoint. Is beyond belief. But we start out with our first entry, setting I to 0, and then we see the value of 16 when we do age, using an I for an index value. When I is 1, we'll see the value 45. When I is 2, we see the value 29. And you get the idea, as we increase the value of I, we see a different value in our array. But if we're using the for each loop, we don't see that index value. What we end up seeing is just the array in that entry's value. So we see the first value was 16, The second value in our for each list was 45, 29, 24, and 14. I mention that because I want you to notice that we don't know which index value we're looking at in a for each loop as we process the items. So when we're using a for each loop, the syntax is for is our keyword. We have our for each criteria is the in keyword. Our for loop still has to end with a colon. The in is required. Right after the for keyword, we have the name of the variable to hold each of our entries. Finally, at the very end of our for each loop, we specify the list that we're looking at. So it's a little complicated, but very, very powerful. So we're getting to our good, powerful stuff. Now, besides just having one array, sometimes we need to keep track of more information. So we saw at the beginning we could have an array of strings like people's names. And then we saw at the end or towards the middle, we could have an array of integers too. Maybe those are people's ages. What if we needed to keep track of how old these people are? Well, we can set up these arrays in parallel so that if I look at index entry 4, I see the name is Austin and Austin's age is 14. So I would have to do that programmatically in my program, keep these arrays in sync. But we do that all the time, and that's called parallel arrays, where we're keeping two separate arrays with two pieces of information, but we can combine them together to get the data that we need. So in that instance, if our index value was 0, we would be looking at Joe, who was 16. And if our index value was 1, we would be looking at Bill, who is 45, or our new name person, who's 29. So that's just simply a parallel array, is where in our program, we have two arrays that we keep track of related things. So an array is a list in Python. Whenever we're working with Python and you're doing Google searches and things, you might find some information on arrays. We couldn't a while back, but since so many people are using Python as a beginning programming language, that term has become something that they're aware of in Python. Oh yeah, I guess we do have arrays. We call them lists. So the arrays let us manipulate repeating data elements efficiently. And we can use them really, really closely with our for loops. As a matter of fact, we have a special for loop syntax, the for each, that lets us process all the entries in an array. And we're going to look at some practice programs to let us try some different data types, values, and conditions, and all those great things. So let's go find our Colab notebook for this one. In Canvas, again, it's week 13, chapter 7. And once you get to it, let's save it. How's everybody doing at home? I save a copy and drive. And I'm going to put our class in it. Go from there. Now, the first thing I want to do is I want to take that code that we created in idle, and I'm going to copy it. And I'm going to put it up here at the very top before our introduction. Maybe. It's like not letting me. There you are. It's kind of locked up. Because that code was kind of before we ever even got to this Colab document, but it's some good, just little sample for us of how we do some really basic things with our arrays. So in our introduction, looking at our objectives, we want to primarily be able to declare and use one-dimensional arrays. We also want to have a little bit of an understanding of parallel arrays. As we get back from our break, we'll be talking about the relationship between databases and our parallel arrays. See how to look at character strings as arrays, which I think you guys have already done using your name project. Find the length function to tell us how many entries are in an array. And then towards the end, we'll just look real quickly at using two-dimensional arrays because they're not really used heavily. Okay, example 7.1 in our pseudocode shows some pseudocode of entering elements in an array. So in this pseudocode, the array is named scores, and we're using a variable named k to start at 0 and go up to 25 to be our index. So we can assume quite a bit of information from this little blurb of pseudocode. We know our array name, we know our index name, and we know that they want 25 entries in our array. So let's try to write some code like that in Python. Actually, I already did for you so that you wouldn't have to. So let's look at it. First of all, there's two different code snippets for this little pseudocode. The first one starts out setting up the scores array with 25 entries. So how are we doing that? Well, we're starting out telling Python the name of our variable is scores. Then the square brackets tell Python it's a list, it's an array, and the 0 inside the square bracket says we want the default or the starting value of all of the entries in our array to be 0. Then the times 25 says there should be 25 entries in that array. So that's what we have going on in that one line of code. That's what that comment says. Allocate our array with 25 entries, value 0. Now we're going to go into a for loop, and for each of those 25 entries, we're going to ask the user to enter a score. And then we're going to put that score into our scores array. When we're all done, we're going to print it. I don't even want to run this in Colab. Let's just copy it and go straight to that Python tutor website. And I'm going to choose edit this code so I can paste in this loop.
Sorry. So it says, and I might have misunderstood what you said. So it says for K in range, and I see this often. Usually it's for I in range, like whenever I'm looking up something. So the I is talking, or the K is talking about the index.
Right.
That's universal. It doesn't matter what I put in that. So I could put blank space instead of a K. Like I could write out blank space instead of K. And it's,
If you wanted to be super confusing, blank space would be, yeah.
But you know what I mean. I can put whatever the heck I want.
Right, any variable name.
And it's gonna tie itself to the index.
Nope.
No, okay.
It's not an index at all. It's just an integer. It's just an integer. It's just when you put it within square brackets, it's used as an index.
Oh.
So being an index is nothing magic. Okay? It is just an integer. And whenever we put that integer variable within those square brackets, we're saying use that integer as an index to go find the right entry in this array. So let's run it and see.
Oh, I see. Because scores has got that array.
Uh-huh.
And then it's saying.
Yeah, let's run it. I think this one really does show up good in the visualizer. I'm going to start out. My very first line of code is going to allocate this scores array. And remember, we said the way this syntax is set up, which is kind of weird, is it's going to give it the array an initial value of 0 for 25 entries. So if I run that line of code, there's our array. So each of our entries has an initial value of 0, and there are 25 of them. Now, the index is kind of shown up here in grayed out because that's not really saved anywhere. It's just sort of an internal thing. Okay, so now we know our scores array has those entries. So if I click next, we're going to go into our for loop. In the first execution of our for loop, K is set to 0. Now, we're going to print out that message asking them to enter a score, and I'm going to type in a score, let's say 40. That should end up in this first score because K is 0 right here. So now when I submit, I'll see, oh, yep, now I've got a value of 40 in that first one. So if I click next, K is now 1. So now whatever value I type should go into my array entry index location 1. And I'll just keep typing 42, and we'll just slowly fill up all of those spots in our array. But let me edit this code because I think that it's such a good question. So if I don't want to use K, I could use index. And then I could change it here to use index as a variable name because it's just a variable. Now it sets up my array. Now when I click next, instead of seeing my variable K, I'm going to see my variable index is set to 0. I'm going to enter my score. And it's going to put it into index entry 0 of my scores array. I'll put in another score. Because my index is now 1, it goes into my index 1 entry. Keep going. And we'll keep entering our values until we've got that array filled up. Do you see what it's doing?
I see how to use it, just something's not clicking in my brain and I don't know how to.
That's all right. Let's look at the other option. Whenever we're doing Python, this first option sets up our array with 25 entries, all set to a value of 0, and then we go through and add scores to each of those. This second option is more Pythonic, is what I would say. It doesn't match our pseudocode as well, and it would have required a little more research to find this code. So let's run it. I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to run it in the Python tutor website. It's very similar. It's going to do the exact same thing, just with a little bit different of code. So in this case, I'm going to start out saying scores is an array. I don't know how many entries it has. It's just an array. So when I run that line of code, we should see here's scores. It's an empty list. It's got nothing in it. Now our for loop is the same. We're using a variable named K to run our for loop, and we're going to use K in a range from 0 to 25. Each time K changes, we'll be prompted to enter a score. Oops, let me fix that. It just says print. I need an input, huh? Try to make it like that other one. You try that again. Oops. Oh, I see what I've done. Hang on. Okay, so start out with an empty list, go into our for loop, and we prompt for a score. Now, when I type in the score, instead of me assigning that score to an index location in the scores array, I'm going to use the array.append function to take that value that was input and put it into my list. So now I've got the value of 43 in my list. I'm going to keep going. Now I'm going to add another value, 48, and it gets added to my list. Notice how there's only two values in this array right now, index value 0, index value 1. So as I use the append function, I'm just adding the scores to the array as we process them in the loop. In our earlier example, the array was already allocated, the slot was already there, we were just filling it. So whenever we append, we're just adding new entries to our array. Go back to that Colab document and look at those two different types of code. Either one is fine. We're just adding more scores into our array. Let's try this. When it rains, it pours when, so that we can use an example. In this example, we're going to be prompting the user for rainfall amounts. And we want to know how much it rains every month. So we're going to need to keep track of 12 different months to know how much it rained each of those months. So we want to ask them how much it rained for month number 1, month number 2, month number 3, etc. I'm going to grab a snip of this code. See if I can get it. Try that again. That one's no good. So looking at our pseudocode, we're going to have an array named rain that's going to have 12 entries. As people type in the amount of rainfall for a given month, we're going to add that to our total called sum. After we've gotten all 12 months worth of data, we can use that sum to calculate an average for each month. Our for loop is going to run 12 times, and in each time we're going to ask them for the rainfall amount for that month and save what they type in into our array. After our loop is over, when we've processed all 12 months, we're going to print out each of those months with that data. So let's try it. So this one will be example 7.2 rainfall amounts. So we're going to collect rainfall amounts for each month. We're going to try to set things up the way they have it in the pseudocode. So in our array, we're going to start out with a value of 0 for each month, and we want 12 of them. So we're going to keep an entry for each month. Now, besides that, we're going to have a sum variable that we want to start out at 0, an average variable that we'll go ahead and start out at 0, even though we'll be calculating it. And a lot of times when we're using for loops, and you'll see that I for I in, that is short for index, and that's why they use the I a lot. I have not been able to determine why our textbook uses K. So I don't know if it's keeping track of the index or why they've decided to use K. I think because I is just very hard to read in a printed textbook. you know, because we all the time are like, is that a L or is that a 1 or is that a I? So I think just textbook wise, they decided that they shouldn't use that I as a variable name. And I respect that. From trying to read textbooks over the years, it can get really hard. So now we want to prompt for our rainfall amounts. So we're just going to use a for loop, and they're using this variable named K. So we can do that. And we'll say that we want to use K in a range from 0 to 12. Now I can print out my prompt, enter rainfall for month. And then they want us to add the month number. So K plus 1. Now that's going to be a number, so we need to convert that to a string. So our printout should say enter rainfall for month 1, because we don't want it to say enter rainfall for month 0. So that's why we're adding a month to our K index variable. Now we can read in that value that they give us directly into our rain array. So we're going to say let that entry equal whatever they typed in. And then let's add that to our sum, that rain amount. That's going to be the end of our for loop. I'm going to put that in a comment. End of our for loop. Let's run it and just make sure we don't have any errors. So we're starting out setting up our rainfall array in our variables, and now I am in my loop. Enter rainfall for month 1. And oops, I was going to say it should keep asking me oh, it says that you're trying to mix integers and strings. So in my input statement, should I be converting that to an integer? Probably. And that's what I was wanting to test to make sure I don't have any problems like that. Always easier to find them when there's less code. So now let's try again. 12, 12, 12. Looks good. Got done, and I'm done with that for loop. So it worked. It's prompting me correctly. I think it's loading everything up into my array. So once I'm done with my for loop, I can calculate the average. We've already been adding it up into our sum variable. So our average is going to be our sum variable divided by 12. It would be better, though, if we learned how to find out the length of our array here, right? So instead of using 12, let's say we want the length of our rain array. And that should be 12. And for this particular application, the number 12 there is fine. It's not going to ever change. But I wanted to show you how to use that length parameter. So now I've got the average calculated. Let's run another loop through our array to print out each month. So I can do the same type for loop. And this time I'll print out the value rainfall for months. And then I want to add in the string of k plus 1. Then I want a little bit more. I'm going to put the word is surrounded by spaces. And finally, the value in our rain array at this index location for k. So this month's rain amount value. That one line of code is all we need in that for loop. So as a final thing, let's print out the average monthly rainfall is, and then our average is a string. So let's see if that works. Can get everybody's work in here. If I start out, I should get my prompt for my rainfall. I'll just type them all in. And I know that since I'm entering the same number for each month, my average should be that number. Oops, I got a problem though. Now, rainfall for a month. It says there's still a type error. K plus 1, it's still upset about, so we better put some additional parentheses there. Because what I want to convert to a string is the output from the calculation K plus 1. So I'm going to do the same thing down here. No, that one should be okay. Let's try it again. I'm not sure that's our error.
Do the plus marks need to be replaced with commas since it's a string?
We could do that, but I think we just need another set of parentheses. Because our parentheses are doing our formula, our calculation, and then we need a set of parentheses for our string function. Took care of it up here. Did that fix it? Uh-huh.
I ran it with that and it didn't work.
It didn't like it either, huh?
I'm running it with it.
Is it complaining about that calculation or is it complaining about something else?
Must be string, not plus.
Is it maybe this one here at the end? Rain to the index value of k, does that need to be converted to a string? I bet it's that one, huh? We're getting so fancy, we have more than one. I want to get rid of those extra parentheses I put in that I shouldn't need. Okay, so I'm going to say rainfall for a month plus string the value k plus 1 plus is plus string the value of the rain array, the index value k. Let's see if that gets them all. And the commas would work. I just like for us to do that extra debugging to figure out what our problem is. So there we go. Now we've got our rainfall amount printing out and our average rainfall printing. Is everybody's working okay? Well, so far this semester, we've been able to do pretty good at getting enough stuff done in class to have everything ready to work on for the week. This week might be a little different. And I have to get some videos out to you guys, so be watching for Discord because I want you to be able to finish as much of the array stuff as possible because I said we only have a couple of meetings left after Thanksgiving. So be watching Discord and I'll get messages out to you. I have a list that I'm working on of all of the remaining student activities for this collab. And so I'll get that to you as far as which ones I want you to worry about, which ones I don't want you to worry about. So you don't need to stress and think that you need to finish this whole thing up at this point. At this point, I want you to focus on your Chapter 7 review questions in your textbook and really focus on those, and I'll get information to you. I said on the rest of the collab notebook. I haven't decided yet. I'm going to do like a short little video for each one, or if I'll do one for the whole thing and have you guys get all bored and tired. It's much easier on my end to make one video, but I think for students it's easier to watch many. So it's always just kind of a quandary just like that. Questions before we go? Yes?
You go.
I was just gonna say, you can make one video and then put timestamps in the comments.
That does not sound easy. Yes. We are talking about time here. I am not a video professional. I actually deleted a comment on YouTube like that a couple weeks ago that said, you should have, I don't even know what. I was like, dude, you should give me a studio and then you can give me comments like that.
Right.
Your question.
We're gonna go over functions more, because I still feel kind of not on solid ground with functions, like user defined.
We can talk about it more. So any questions like that you have, I'm sure everybody would like to hear about them. And you're welcome to post stuff like that to Discord, and I'll try to work on getting answers in video.
Okay.
So no promises. So I'll try to get things like that. But remember, with your functions, you guys really do have a really good handle on it. And when you go to C#1 and Java 1 and all those other classes, you'll get so much more practice. So it's hard because I know in the intro class, it's hard for you to walk off thinking, I don't have an absolute handle on that, but it's okay. Because you're going to get lots of additional practice with those kind of things in the other classes. And you guys actually have a really, really good understanding of what they are. So anything like that that you can think of, post in Discord and we'll get some answers going. Yeah, I guess it goes back to that brain surgeon thing. You know, whenever the brain surgeon takes the first class about surgery, they don't let them go do brain surgery right away. And the brain surgeon knows when he leaves that class, he's got a lot more to learn. He's going to have a lot more opportunities to learn those things. And that's where we have to be, because we don't get to learn everything all at once. It's just not possible. Too much of it. Oh, I hope you guys have a great Thanksgiving and everybody stays safe. Any other questions before we go? Okay, I'm going to end this thing then. We are almost done with our hybrid.
You turned in your quest?